Hi, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about short stories. Specifically, we're going to be talking one of my unpublished short stories, Ode to Odessa, which Tete here has already read actually a couple of times. We're going to begin this discussion by talking about short stories in general and how we approach them, because both of us have written short stories before.
So, hey there. So glad to be on the show on the podcast again, and it's great that we're discussing short stories, especially what with it being National Writing Month of November. I think that would probably encourage a lot of people, since people who want to maybe bring up their word count, they could do that through a series of short stories as well.
Definitely. Yes, I agree. In the past, I remember you have written a number of short stories, including some commissions you did for me.
Yes, yes, you had commissioned me, I believe it was 2016, 2017, and 2018 to do several short stories, and they had dealt with your characters such as Katya and my character of Andre, your characters of Mitya and Ardayan from another series, which are now appearing in another series as well, in your recent work and such. And I believe the other one was dealing with Katya Ardayan and one of my characters, Natalia, in a sort of afterlife alternate universe type of story. So yeah, there's been quite some wonderful commissions that you commissioned from me, and I thoroughly enjoyed writing them. I think short stories are a great way to really get like open, if you will, the oyster of the character and get to the pearl of them.
Mm-hmm. In particular, which short story did you enjoy writing the most?
I think I enjoyed writing all of them equally. I think the one that probably the one that I had the most fun doing was Katya and Andre when it dealt with Katya's birthday, but the one that I think had the most emotional, if you will, reverberation or pathos, I believe it was the two stories with Ardayan, as we explained in a previous episode on our podcast. Ardayan, once you really tear under the layers of him, is a very fascinating character study.
Mm-hmm. And you always, understood him so well. It was really great to read your portrayal of him because it really sparked a lot of ideas.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad that that helped. I think you really communicated a lot, and what you left open, to interpretation, you had laid the groundwork. So it was very rewarding to work with him. It was sort of like, building a canal that was already mapped, and the scaffold was laid in place.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's really a pleasure to hear that Ardayan is a great character to work with and that you had a foundation to build on, so to speak.
Yes, yes, you certainly did provide that. And I think, when writers can collaborate like that, it sort of reminds me a little bit of, I mean, I'm not comparing us to that. I'm not saying audaciously that we are like them, but it reminds me of like in the 90s when Gaiman and Pratchett they collaborated together to write a book together, Good Omens. You know what I mean? When two writers
Mm-hmm.
can really understand what they're working with and
Mm-hmm.
understand each other, I think it makes for great collaborations and great crossovers.
It definitely does, yeah. For
Yeah.
Pratchett and Gaiman, I mean, I haven't read it myself, but I know that there's like one character that's an angel and the other that's a demon. Does one of them write one of the angel characters and the other writes the demon?
No, it was actually divided into kind of events. Pratchett focused more on the everyday characters. For example, there was a group of kids, because this was kind of a comedy parody. So there was a group of kids. There was a very eccentric old man who thought witchers were real. There was sort of just this poor young man. He can't find a job anywhere. He's like a temp, and he keeps losing his jobs, and he ends up with this crazy guy who thinks witches are real. So Pratchett focused mostly on the kids, sort of like the everyday English people,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, and a little bit more on the angel per se, while Gaiman focused solely on the demon, and I would say half of the angel.
Because he's a fantasy writer, right? So I guess his focus naturally would be the supernatural in the series.
True, true. I think Gaiman, he's always been, how do I say better, I think, at handling the sharper, edgier things, which isn't to say that Pratchett couldn't, but Pratchett is he was more, and rest in peace to Pratchett.
Oh no.
Respect,
He's
yeah.
passed away?
Yeah, he passed away in 2015.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, so rest in peace, Sir Terry.
Yeah,
Um,
indeed.
yeah. But Pratchett's always been very strong in comedy, which isn't to say that Gaiman isn't, but I mean Pratchett, when he does comedy, it's just so tongue in cheek. It's a delight to go through. And Gaiman was describing the process of how he and Pratchett were writing, and it was back and forth. It was like a wonderful tennis game, and he would tell Gaiman, well, I think they would have done this or they would have done that, and Gaiman was able to build from that because they both had solid understandings of the characters, but they both had different aspects that they understood better of. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
so complete. And it's just a very, very fun read. And it does give some, kind of sweet insights into human nature and things. And it's just a great read overall. So it's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful to see when two authors can understand each other like that. And I think we
Mm-hmm.
kind of had, sort of a similar, if you will, successive communication like that.
I think so. I mean, especially with certain characters that we both worked on, like Ardayan and Katya. I think you, in particular, understand them a lot.
I do. I mean, Ardayan and Katya, I understand them extremely well. They are just wonderful to work with. I I don't know, they just come to life for me, and it's just wonderful being able to work with them and being able to, how do I say, just bring them to life, so to speak. Well, I mean, they're already alive, but for me to take the reins over and work with them, it's wonderful. And like I said, you've already set the foundation, and I think it's wonderful the way you communicate it so clearly. One is able to understand them so clearly, and it makes it all the more clear when you do it.
Mm-hmm. I see. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, on to Ode to Odessa. In your viewpoint, how do you see this story? Does it compare to the commissions that you did back in 2016 in terms of structure? Because it's also around, I think, 2000-ish words, which your commissions were.
Right, right. Yeah, as I was gonna say, it was like around the same length. I would have to say, it's similar. I mean, pardon me, I have hiccups. Would be like around the length, I think, and the style and pacing. But it is uniquely yours in terms of, your voice, and your narrator, and of course the characters, so it is uniquely your own. But it is similar because it is a short story. It is the same length, the same kind of structure, and of that nature. So yeah, I do believe it is similar.
Mm-hmm. So, in your viewpoint, what do you like the most about Ode to Odessa? What do you like the least?
What I like the most from Odessa, to start off with, I think I love the energy. Well, how to say, what's the word I want to use? I love the enthusiasm of Sam's idealism about reimagining, or just imagining, if you will, through kind of maybe a slightly revisionist lens. Not really per se, because I mean it is fairly accurate what Sam is portraying. But you know how it is, when someone else is portraying something and they didn't live through it, there may be some facts that are not 100% accurate. Um, but Sam nails the atmosphere, the attitude, if we will, the chutzpah, if you will, in his own words.
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah. Okay, my bad. I just see that ch, and I just think shah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I that's what I love from Odessa. I love how he paints it. You can almost imagine it coming to life through the sepia, and it's slowly, dissolving, if you, well, not dissolving, but like getting more bright, brilliant in color. It comes to life. It feels real. I mean, you really do feel the turn of the century, if you will, beyond. Well, you feel the early 20th century of Odessa. you can feel Lev's just vigorous spirit, as he's wanting to, join the Enlightenment movement, join the progressive politics of the time, think of the social changes and things on that. How Sam's describing his friends like Anton and other friends as well. The way that Sam describes his mother, I think is a testimony of, I think it's a wonderful thing to see Sam, speak, think so highly of his parents, because he does love his parents. It's just that internal struggle that, unfortunately comes, when they have to deal with the stagnation of America, which, ironically happens so often. Um, yeah, don't do it. Don't do anybody thinking about it. Don't. um, I'm not saying it to be mean. You will just become stagnant. um,
Depends. I think some people make it, but I mean, like I said, like we only hear about the success stories and not the failures.
that's true. We exactly, and you know what? We don't even hear like people who aren't a failure, but they're not a success. You know what I mean? Like they didn't become the next Elon Musk, but
No, no,
you know,
definitely not. But
but
Elon Musk, he immigrated as an adult. You know, all those people who are saying we did this for our kids, they immigrated when their kids were like babies or they were born in America.
that's true. That's true. Well, yeah, because then I always think of those PBS narratives where it's inspirational or something.
Yeah, it's always about the parents like being like really frugal or something, and then they push their kids to like go to Harvard, and then their kids who were born in America are like, kind of like bringing joy to their family because they succeeded, but their family is like running a gas station or something.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, those that it's such a rare occurrence,
I
to be
know,
honest.
and it feels like, it's a more American exceptionalism. I mean, yes, America has a lot of opportunities. This is true, but does everyone get to experience the not the ability, like the actually get to have these kind of things? I mean, some people try really hard, but they never make it, right? And it always feels like, oh yeah, you didn't try this hard. I mean, you didn't try hard enough, and that's why you didn't make it. That's how it always feels to me. Like there's always this kind of condescension. Like if you're an immigrant, you have to take shit because, that's just how things are, apparently. Like you have to go through so much suffering just to stand on a even playing level with, people who aren't immigrants, which is so unfair, all because your family moved to America or whatever other country from another country means they have to go through crap.
Yeah, that in itself is wrong, and not just economic, but what makes me infuriates me is the social nonsense. Like maybe if people would stop being so discriminatory. I can't stand that because people are like, oh, we don't like you because you're not 100% like us, and I just get tired of that, or the sort of condescending where they treat someone as though they are ignorant, as we've kind of discussed, like
Hmm.
yeah, when we had another person talk about her experience.
Exactly. And I just think it's really unfair. It's like, it's almost kind of like sanctifying or saying, this is just the way it is. Suck it up. If you want to come to America, this is the kind of environment you have to deal with. It's like you can't even go against the narrative because the narrative is so entrenched in these kind of immigrant narratives.
It is, sadly, and I think that's wrong. I think it needs to stop. It should stop.
And there's also like this exotification of like, how their parents before they went to America, they went through so much crap. I mean, of course, some people did. I'm not downplaying that. There was a lot of crap, and a lot of people had to flee wars, ethnic discrimination, and a lot of other things. I just don't like how this trope is overplayed. And in every narrative we hear about, it's like that. I think that's a problem because it's basically kind of solidifying, oh sorry, I'm just like my throat, solidifying the stereotype that every country that's not Western has a lot of problems, like the Western world doesn't have any problems.
And that in itself is very, very damaging because the West does have problems, and and I think and also I think it enforces sort of that exceptionalism, which I think is inaccurate, and it's harmful as well.
It's also kind of an Orientalism. I mean, it's not always Orientalism, because this also applies to places that are not, quote, part of the Orient, but it's similar. Everything that's not Western or not advanced, quote unquote, advanced enough is portrayed as like this whole like terrible misogynistic place where people get killed.
Exactly, exactly. And that in itself is very damaging because then what does that say about, people coming to a society as a whole? Like what does that say about people who are fleeing from it? What does that say about the people and their culture? I mean, not to overgeneralize, but you know what I mean? It's like everything is forced to become generalized. Well, the West doesn't have that responsibility. Like, oh, something bad happened. Oh, it was just an individual or
Yeah,
whatever.
like what is with like okay, the West is allowed to be an individual. Oh, some random guy shot up, some church or something and he screamed some white power slogan. Oh, it's just him. He has problems. It's not reflection of America as a whole or that Western country as a whole. But like, oh, there's a war in Vietnam. Oh, that's because of the communists. And then like they always like these stereotypes about how like, oh, it's because they're backwards, blah, blah, they're savages. Their cultural values, quote unquote, their cultural values are different. And I always feel like they say, I'm not a racist, I'm just talking about cultural values. Is bullshit, because a lot of the times they're just saying cultural values to hide the fact that they are racist.
It is that exactly. You have taken the words right out of my mouth. That is precisely what it is. It just boils down, when people, anytime anybody says, oh, cultural differences or cultural values, I always take it with a grain of salt because if you're trying to say, oh, this is bad or this is right or it's not Western, therefore it's not progressive or correct, I always, I simply want to shut that off because that in itself just shows, being discriminatory.
It really is. But yeah, back to Ode to Odessa, what I wanted to show, it is connected to what we were talking about, is how sorry, not Ben, sorry, Sam goes against, why did I say Ben? Sorry.
I was
Sam
thinking a burr.
yeah, Sam was going against the immigrant narrative. I mean, he is, like a lot of those people in the books we've been criticizing, like, Joy Love Club, where he is born in America and his parents are immigrants from Russia, but he doesn't say, oh, thank goodness I'm born in America, the land of the free. I didn't have to go through the same shit as my parents did. And he like, he doesn't make Russia out to be this awful, awful, awful place with no redeeming qualities. Yes, he does recognize there were a lot of flaws. And I think I made that clear in the story. He's not saying that it was perfect.
Right. I mean, he's not saying there's no two extremities. He's not saying it's like, the land of happy smiles, but at the same time, he's not making it a depressive thing like Fiddler on the Roof or I don't know, Fievel, you know.
And also, everyone had different experiences. I think that's very important. Just because, some people had really awful experiences in a certain country doesn't mean everyone immigrating from that country had the same experiences. I think a lot of immigrant narratives and a lot of transnational narratives in general have this kind of stereotype that, oh, they came from a country that had this happening, or it means everyone who's an immigrant from that country probably went through it.
And that in itself is such a dangerous generalization because then, I mean, also just think of the ignorant, embarrassing conversations. I know because, somebody I'm very connected to had the same, well, similar thing happen. They think, oh, this thing happened or this, thing happened. And, um, which ironically, the person I'm connected to did go through that stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't define them. It doesn't
No, it
define.
doesn't. But I noticed that in American and other Western, especially English speaking immigrant narratives, somehow these traumatic events, if they do happen, which they 90% do to these characters, for some reason, I think we know why, because of the whole
Right.
Orientalist, oh my God, the other country is so bad and America is just so great. You never see trauma in America. Everyone's happy. There's no racism. Your kids are going to Harvard or something, and you're going to retire, and your kids are going to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Exactly. It's always that kind of narrative, and that is very dangerous too, because um, who's to say that, well, for example, I mean, there was something there, for example, I watch a lot of crime things, just for the sake of it, and But there was one thing I thought was well, no, I think it was awful and terrible, but it shows that people who come to America don't always have it great. These people had came from a certain country, they came to America, and unfortunately something very bad happened to them, and they decided to go back to their original country after a while, after this bad thing had happened. And it shows me
Mm-hmm.
that they had such hopes and everything that America was going to give them the golden dream, and it doesn't. I mean,
No.
yes, some places may offer maybe a little bit more, security per se, if we could say that, but it doesn't ensure success. Security doesn't equate success. And it also depends on the individual. Maybe somebody likes living at a certain level, and they like it because there's no turmoil or anything. If they come from somewhere that is experiencing turmoil or natural disaster or anything. But at the same time, you can't say, oh, it's all backwards. And also, another thing I can't stand, when something bad happens, like just natural disasters, which nobody can control,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people somehow, I don't know, they sort of throw a moral judgment on it, or I don't know. It just gets on my nerves when there's always this thing of where everybody makes assumptions about, just because it's not Western or English speaking or whatever have you, it's backwards and it's impoverished or whatever. Or the people, there's something wrong with the people. I do not like that. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
horribly ignorant way
It
and
is. You
yeah.
know, it makes me want to start something totally not related to Sam in New York, but kind of like a reverse Joy Luck Club. You know, people are leaving America or another Western country. It doesn't have to be America, right? And I'm just using it as an example because it's mostly about America. So, like, it could be like these people who immigrated to a Western country, take your pick, could be Australia, New Zealand, Canada, whatever. And then, like, 20 years later, they decide to leave because there's nothing for them. Like, why can't that be an empowering narrative? Why does it always have to be, yeah, we're in America, you know, we're like blah blah, so successful, and then like the kids, they just become like really against their parents for quote unquote being old fashioned. Hey, what if we turned it around and made the kid be more like not anti, but like, you know, I want to go back to my home country. I don't really want to be here. I don't see a lot of opportunities for me. Like, I would like to see a story where the kid is the one who wants to go back, but the parents are like, you know, really buying into the narrative that, you know, being in a Western country automatically means you have more opportunities, even when the truth is staring them in the face and it's not.
I think that would be a very, very fascinating narrative. It's a narrative that unfortunately is seldom told, I think, in media, or at least it's not recognized.
And I would like to do it because, you know, in 2020, there are these people like this. You know, there are more opportunities in some cases. It depends on your industry and what your skills are, obviously. But we can't always say that every industry is better off in a Western country, and then people from non-Western countries need to go there to find a job. Sometimes you can't find a job. Some people end up 20 years doing almost nothing, or like doing contract jobs that barely pay anything just because they want to stay in the Western country. But why? Like, sometimes there is no need to do it. Some people actually regret immigrating, and we never hear that. But I know people in real life who do regret immigrating.
Right, right. And those should be told. I mean, I think it's something that desperately needs to be shown. And I think that you would probably be the most qualified to discuss that and show it, because of
Right.
your, yeah.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to put down anyone's experiences. Everyone's experiences are different. Some people do find what they are looking for in America or in another Western country. And perhaps Sam does. I mean, in many ways, I think his personality fits America a lot better than Russia.
I think it does. I mean, to be honest, as much as it would be interesting to see Sam, how he would, be in Russia, I think he's built for America. He's a jazzy, jaunty kid, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's like somebody I would have fun, I would like to have
Yeah.
fun with as a friend.
I think that's what I'm trying to explore too. Yes, I mean, in many ways, Sam is very American, but at the same time, he challenges these, you know, very entrenched assumptions about America being a better country. Like, he knows that in many ways he's very Americanized, and you know, his viewpoints, his personality is very Americanized, but he doesn't think he's better than everyone else because of it. unlike, a lot of these immigrant narratives, like there's a recent one, it's on Netflix. It's called Never Have I Ever. Have I told you about that one?
I have heard of it, but I do not know what the gist of it is. I'd like to know.
So it's about an Indian American girl, like the stereotype again. So basically, her parents are like really strict and they want to force her into an arranged marriage, and she's against it. And she doesn't like her own traditions that much. So then she falls in love with her classmate who is half white, half Japanese. And then she starts being friends with benefits with him just to give a middle finger to her traditional culture.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, I mean, I could understand someone's frustration. I mean, an arranged marriage, I mean, was kind of scary when you think about it in the 21st century, especially like, I think the parents, should be like, I mean, here's the thing. Something like traditional marriage, you cannot put a cultural label on it. It's just not the best thing for the 20th first
Mm-hmm.
century. It's not like we have a dying population and we must produce as many children as we can to sustain ourselves. It's the 21st century. I think women should have the agency, and men too, because the
Mm-hmm.
guys getting roped into it too. People should have
Exactly.
agency. Um, so I understand why some people want to, if you will, buck tradition. Because a lot of traditions, are not necessarily relevant
Mm-hmm.
to the 21st century, but at the same time, I think that's a little bit too stereotypical. I don't know if anyone's really that entrenched in it, because I think everybody today is kind of becoming global, don't you think?
I think some cultures less, but the problem isn't so much whether this is accurate or not. I think it's just like the trope because it's been done a billion times. And do we
I
need to see more of it? I think that's the main question I had when I saw it. But I'm not Indian. I'm just saying this as someone who studies Orientalism and how, quote, Eastern cultures are portrayed in Western media. And yes, some Indian people still do have arranged marriages. It's true. But we never see in the Western media people who are more neutral towards the concept because some people in India, and I'm not speaking for them, it's just these articles I read, they're actually okay with it because they don't see it as something that's forced. Some arranged marriages, they are not forced. It's just like meeting a person and deciding if you want to be with them. So they at least like as long as both of them are okay with it, it doesn't have to be demonized as much. I think the problem may be that, a lot of Western media puts a lot of stereotypes and they always every time they talk about an Indian person, there always has to be some kind of forced or arranged marriage. I think that's why it could be problematic.
Yes, that is a very good point, and I think you are right. I think that is what kind of brings its problematic nature into the foreplace. The fact that it's always portrayed as this. It's never, something like, I don't know, something more nuanced. Like, I don't know, somebody wants to become a YouTube star and their parents are like, I don't know, you should study to be a doctor or something, but they want to become a YouTube star. That would be an interesting um thing. That would be an
Mm-hmm.
interesting narrative. Or something else. I don't know, run a surfboard shop or something.
Mm-hmm. And some people like they actually don't think arranged marriage is that bad because maybe they're like 33 years old, finished their PhD, and they never really had, a good love life. They just couldn't find anyone. So they're like, hey, mom and dad, do you want to like look for someone for me? So that's another way to look at arranged marriage.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I guess, I think what we have to say, I guess when we need to say arranged marriage, it should be clarified that it should be done with the guidance, consent, and supervision of the actual person being arranged with it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Like they always portray it as like, extremely forced and like borderline pedophilic because the girl in the series I think is 15 years old.
Oh Lord, that's
Yeah,
just a
it
little.
is. Like they're not
Good
telling her to
Lord.
marry right away, but I think they want her to marry at 18 or 19 or something.
Yeah, that's a damning, if you will, stereotype. That is. That's like, man, I don't know if
Yeah, it
anybody
is.
really. No, I don't think anybody in their right mind does that. That's
It
just
does feel very
totally.
like from 100 years ago or something.
Yeah, like I said, this is the 21st century. We're not desperately having to repopulate the planet after the ice age or something.
So like if they did want to do a more nuanced take on it, it would be like a 35-year-old PhD graduate who doesn't have a good love life and wants her parents to help her find, a husband.
Right, right. That makes more sense. That, I mean, if they were to show something like that, I mean, but that by all means is okay. That's what I mean when I say like these arranged marriages. It's always portrayed with somebody who's like, not really of legal age per se, getting kind of roped into the idea of that as soon as you hit the legal age, off to the, whatever, and they have no say in it. I mean, I think my biggest problem is when they portray it and they have no say in it. And, I don't think that's realistic. I think for many happy, healthy, normal families that function, I think parents would like to have their kids' input. I mean, this isn't like, some cruel tyrannical thing where, the parents, just dominate the kid's life
Mm-hmm.
and let them have no say. I think things are a lot more nuanced, and heck, maybe even in the ancient days, maybe things were more nuanced. We don't know about it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's just Orientalism, oh, they're not a Western culture, so the parents have to be tyrannical.
And I've always hated that because you know what? I mean, humans are humans. I mean, I know I keep saying that, but I mean, I think all around the world people have like global values. You know what I mean? Like there's love and honesty, and I think that applies to everything regardless of culture. And if people just have a different approach to it or whatever, I think that should be welcomed, accepted, and embraced. I don't think it should be a thing, oh, this is better than that, because of such and such. I think that's a very, very stupid, ignorant way to live life, and you miss out on so much when you live your life like that or you discriminate like that.
I agree, yeah. But back to Ode to Odessa, that's one of the
Right.
themes I wanted to explore. That Sam, while he's very American, is not someone who believes in this whole idea of, superiority. I think he realizes that people from different parts of the world have their own perspectives, and he's very eager to learn about different perspectives. In fact, he really doesn't like people who are closed minded in that respect, and this is why he doesn't like the dean.
Of course, I was just about to say the dean. Uh, every time I think of the dean, I feel like a little angry Pomeranian. If you ever seen a Pomeranian get angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the dean, unfortunately, he is someone who believes in and Anglo nations in general superiority. And he's like, yeah, we're the bastion of, democracy and freedom and all that stuff. And everywhere else is just terrible, especially Russia, because, they're godless. Because during that time,
Hmm.
they turned communist recently, right? So he's really
Right.
fearful. Yeah.
Wow, Dean. Thank you for your brilliant input.
If he was in the 1960s, he would definitely be one of those people who are always on the edge of their seat about communism.
I mean, to be honest, the Dean feels like a McCarthy fanboy.
And he thinks there's spies everywhere.
He'd probably think Sam's a spy. That's what he'd say.
I
Dumbass.
think he is.
Dumbass.
Oh my god. He really thinks that, like, oh my god, American values have to be protected. You know what? He's basically just like those people in 2020 who are like Trumpists.
Exactly, exactly. I think, and he'd probably support some. I mean, I don't need to go into details because I'm living through this dog and pony show, and I don't know whether to laugh at it or find it disturbing. I honestly have no 2 cents on it,
Oh my
but
god. Yeah. Like I
it's like
think
a
he
bloody circus.
it is really. But yeah, that's one of the themes that Ode to Odessa seeks to explore, as well as the idea of ghostwriting. Sam, in addition to becoming an actor in this AU, at least in this AU of this story, he has also become a playwright, a director, and a writer. What do you think of Sam's voice as a writer?
Sam has a very excellent voice. I like it. It's realistic, it's direct, it's communicative. It's not, if you will, cluttered with complicated prose or, difficult verboise vernacular, which I'm probably doing right now with all the big ass words I just used. But I got my point across. um, But it's not cluttered by any of that. It has it's like if Hemingway was Yiddish, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Sam never really liked verbosity because he thinks that it makes it hard for him to connect with his audiences. Like especially since, it can give people a headache, when it becomes so technical and you're using big words every 5 words. It just kind of feels like you're showing off rather than letting the story explain itself to the audience.
That's true. I mean, I'm all for beautiful words and difficult stuff because I mean, I just flow that way, but um like I said, it depends on your audience, it depends on your target, it depends on what kind of story or thing that you're writing. Here's the thing. The only thing I draw the line is when you can use a simpler word to communicate something more clearly, or if your line of communication is bogged down by fancy words that it becomes purple prose, then that's just rubbish and you should chuck it out. I mean, I myself personally kind of encourage neo-romanticism. So if anybody wants to write like Hawthorne or Edgar Allan Poe, look me up and just DM me on Instagram. But otherwise, be simplistic, clear, and just down to earth, which is what Sam is.
I think even when you want to use more complicated words, a lot of the time, like I said, it depends on the audience and the intent that you're looking for when you're writing it. It's better to space it out. Like, if you're using two really difficult words, just do two of them on one page. Don't have two really long, difficult words. And then the next sentence, you have like 5 of them.
Exactly, exactly. It is about spacing. For example, like when I write now, this is a bigger problem when I do fantasy than it is when I do like Andre, because Andre's like blunt, very blunt, and he does not use fancy words. I think what I try to do is if I can use a simpler word to describe something, then I do it. And usually my paragraphs, like if like say a page, it's probably going to have maybe five, maybe 3 or 4 big words, but it's something that I think people know what it is. Like for example, I'll say something radiated. The star was radiant or something. Somebody will think, oh, it's shiny, which is just what radiant means.
Mm-hmm.
But radiant is a way to make it sound more specific. For me, I use it because it's specific.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, some writers, and I might talk about this another time, but even in nonfiction, there is this weird trend of some writers using really, really big words, and it seems like they're doing it to achieve a certain purpose. There was one book I reviewed, which will be posted, the book review of which will be posted later this week. He's a nonfiction writer, but basically he wrote about saving the environment. And basically, one of the problems I didn't like about the book, at least, was that unfortunately he has a lot of run on sentences. And then he also has this weird, like, arrogant tone where he's like, I didn't originally care about saving the environment. And then he uses some really big words. But now I care because I realized that when my daughter grows up, she can't enjoy the same things as I did. And he said, I don't care about nature for the sake of caring about nature. It's the blah, blah, blah of his existence, blah, 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 blah. And then the whole rest of the page is just him talking about, all of these things have happened because of humans being selfish. And then it's just like a really long run on sentence. And it just feels really pretentious.
Oh my gosh, that is. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, and I
That
hated his tone too. He's like, I'm just an ordinary, hamburger eating American. That's how he said it. A hamburger eating American who isn't even a vegetarian. Like, I'm like, what are you trying to say? I don't get it. Like, I know what you're trying to say, and it sounds arrogant.
It does. That is arrogant. My goodness. I don't like that tone. I
Yeah,
mean,
he
you
is
know what I
sort
hate
of.
it? I hate it when people, you know what? Here's the thing. Like, not to interrupt, but just to throw my 2 cents
Mm-hmm.
because, my brain, I'll forget it.
Yeah.
The more somebody brags about their humility, the more it lends to hubris because anytime anyone is proud of their humility, it's just the most I would say outrageous form of hubris, of pride, when you say how
Mm-hmm.
humble you are. Because I think the only way I could accept somebody maybe coming across as humble is saying, I struggle a lot with pride. I honestly don't know how much pride I have. or what I am truly, because can any of us really, what's the word I want to use? Can any of us really assess who we really are? Then
Mm-hmm.
I can take that as true humility, because we all have a form, an ounce or degree of arrogance. It's just human nature. But just to say, oh, I'm just a humble burger eating American, or I don't know, whatever anybody averagely eats in other countries. Like I'm an average eating, I don't know, waffle eater in Belgium. I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anybody from
Mm-hmm.
Belgium. I don't know if you all eat waffles or not. I don't know.
I think the point
But
he was trying to make was that I was like the average American who didn't care about the environment. But now, looking at all the statistics, I am so scared. And then he starts listing off all the bad things that are predicted to happen in 100 years. And what I didn't like about the book, that it was mostly speculation. He was just listing out a bunch of fears, and then like they are cited, but the problem is some of them are not properly cited. Like he talks about the Aral Sea drying up, and he's like, "Oh, that might be because of climate change." I'm like, "Might be?" And I looked it up, and it turns out that the Aral Sea is probably drying up not because of climate change, but because of Soviet policies. So he
yeah,
didn't
which
really
that's
do
what
his research properly. He just puts a barrage of facts, and then he starts like talking about stuff like, oh, I'm so scared about my daughter's future, and he's like, oh, I don't care about animals, but I want humanity to continue living. I'm like, are you trying to be an environmentalist or not? Like, try to take a proper side. If you're just like quote unquote a typical burger eating American who's not even a vegetarian, then don't write this book. I hate this tone where he's like, I don't want to care, but I have to care now.
that is so stupid. And just to put down there, like, I mean, I'm not trying to shame anyone who didn't know about the Ural Sea, but even I knew about that. Like I was like, oh, this sea is drying up. I mean, I even saw. I mean, like, why does not I, but I mean, it kind of shows an American ignorance. I mean, I'm not trying to say every American is ignorant, but let's face it. I will say that most of my countrymen and women, or whatever, non-binary people, do not bother to read anything. I mean, besides tabloid crap.
Exactly. I think I can't really comment on that, but I think he is kind of catering to the lowest common denominator, and by throwing in big words, he thinks he can convince people. So, unfortunately, this is one of the reasons why big words can kind of be a not a good thing to your writing. It can actually detract from your writing.
That's true. That's true. It can. That can be a problem, and that can be a problem for short stories as well. Because like when you're doing a short story, like let's say we're aiming for 6,000 word length. When you're trying to cram like it's a bloody academic paper, people aren't going to enjoy it. Instead, they're going to have to look at the thesaurus or Google, what does this word mean, and then they'll have to look it up every minute.
Exactly. Yeah, it's 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 definitely something that can really change the tone and the accessibility of the short story.
That's very true. I think it needs to be used with caution. Like I said, if somebody wants to do like neo-romanticism, and that's such a tight rope to walk. I will say it is a dangerous rope to walk when you're doing neo-romanticism, because you're almost falling into the lava pit of purple prose, and it's so easy to fall into it. I know, because when I started off writing, I wrote the most god awful purple prose. I think everybody did, but
Hmm.
it happened to me too.
Yeah, I think I did when I wrote some stuff in high school and even the first year of university. I actually thought that it would be, I would sound really smart if I quoted a lot, and over quoting actually is also a really bad thing, by the way. And like over quoting, using big words, and like using really clunky sentence structures, like that is not unnecessarily so, something like that.
Right, exactly. That in itself, it's so hard when you have to read something like that. That can be so hard.
It is, but when I did it as an 18-year-old, I thought I sounded smart. And a few years ago, when I was a teaching assistant at university, I read through some of the essays that some 18-year-olds were writing, and they had the same problem. And me and the professor were just like, that's a really common problem that a lot of people fresh out of high school have.
That's true, they do. That is a problem. I I tend to think it's kind of encouraged a little bit, particularly with everyone's saying, oh, use this and you'll sound smarter. As we say in Spanish, difícil, difficult. But I here's the thing: if you can use a more specific word because you need something more specific, by all means, but make sure that it's clearly communicating it before you drop in, big, $500 words.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, here's the quotation. I'm just opening his book again out of curiosity. I'm not
Oh
about
boy.
to personally slaughter a cow to eat a hamburger, but I'm also not about to go vegan. And then there's like this ridiculous shit here. And then he says, I am like every other American who has spent their life fatally complacent and willfully deluded, in a comma, about climate change, comma, which is not just the biggest threat human life on the planet has ever faced, but a threat of an entirely different category in scale. Period. That is, comma, the scale of human life itself.
Well, that sounds damningly arrogant.
It is, and there's a lot of interesting other quotes here. And he talks about, I don't know, it's not like he doesn't say it directly, but when you read it, it feels like he's like, yeah, we kind of already solved white supremacy. Let's move on to environmentalism. Like he doesn't realize that there's many problems at the same time.
There are a lot of problems. This man does not live in reality, and no doubt, don't no doubt, this man is. I shouldn't challenge his identity, but I think he's part of the problem.
Yeah, and he always talks about, I remember him talking about his daughter or something. That was really weird. Or was that
That,
someone else who did it? I forgot.
my goodness.
But
I
yeah, it
yeah,
was an unenjoyable read, mostly because of his long sentences and like, all of these like ridiculous words he uses sometimes. And I really hate when people just go on like with a lot of facts, just throw all the facts at the person and then at the end just make this nice looking sentence like you kind of convinced them of something, but you really didn't convince them of anything.
that in itself shows a lot of hubris as well, because then you've acted like the expert, the so-called proclaimed expert, and you're making a moral judgment like, oh, if you don't agree with me, then you're not morally sound like I am, or intelligent.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in Ode to Odessa, I also had a lot of quotations and footnotes. What did you think of them?
I thought they were very informative. I mean, this is where quotations and footnotes are informative, because here you're talking about a personal experience reimagined through the somewhat idealistic lenses of someone who is actually also, on the other hand, practical and pragmatic, although still idealistic in a way, Sam. And I thought they were informative. I thought they were enjoyable. I think it gave a lot of, good translation to the Yiddish words that you could not substitute in English, because the Yiddish language is so integral to the identity and meaning of, the words being used or the descriptors being used. So I found the footnotes enjoyable. I always love a good footnote, to be honest. I know a lot of people say, oh, this is, like, whatever, but I love a good footnote because it gives me more into the specifics of a culture or a thing that's happening. And I love it. And I think you used it to very good effect. It wasn't overwhelming. It was done tastefully, well balanced. And I think that's what a lot of people should strive for when they're doing footnotes. For example, you don't have to use, if you can find an equivalent translation that is pretty serviceable, then by all means don't cram in just a word for it. But if you
Mm-hmm.
can't find an equally translatable term or descriptor or whatever, then go with the footnote, because there are so many things that you cannot translate from another language into that, per se.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I was kind of worried that I went overboard with the footnotes.
I don't think so, not in my opinion. I mean, I may be biased because I love footnotes, but I think they'll be very informative for anybody, any of our readers out there who will be, have the chance to read it.
Definitely. I submitted to a contest, and that's the main reason I haven't actually shown it in public yet, because there is like this kind of publication limit. They want to be the first one if they choose my story to publish it.
Right, right. That makes sense. That's why I haven't shared, anything I've done, since I haven't heard yet from the folks that I submitted to. So I'm hoping I hear from them, and then I can have the okay to, publish
Hmm.
my stuff as well.
Exactly. So if it doesn't make it to the submission, I will probably submit it to another journal or contest. Or if not, like if I feel like, the quality of my story isn't as good as my newer ones by then, I'll just put it on Tapas in the anthology of Sam in New York stories that I am creating once I hit 10,000 ink.
Oh, awesome, awesome. I remember you had mentioned that, and that I am personally on pins and needles for it. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Some of the stories that I think are not high quality enough will appear there, and maybe some special stories will appear behind my Patreon paywall.
Perfect, perfect. And that's wonderful. I love to see creators do that. And I'm always eager to see your work. You know I am, because I don't know, I'm your biggest fan.
Remember that was how we met? I think you said that you were my biggest fan when we first met.
Yeah, and I still have remained since, when did we meet? 2016?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm still your biggest fan after like 4 years.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your support. I mean, honestly, without you, I wouldn't have come so far. I probably would have given up or just, I don't know, I would probably just draw and not really create a story, just create random pictures of my characters and then say like one or two sentences about them.
I feel the same. I mean, like I said, I mean, you helped me to really grow as a writer. Without your support, I don't think I would have ever matured. I think I would have still been writing insane purple prose and making really bad characterizations.
I don't think you had bad characters.
I don't know. I always felt, well, the characterizations were bad. I mean, I think I look back on certain ones like, well, the readers won't know who she is, but like Natalia.
I think my characters were bad. I mean, some of them were just so bland, especially when we first met, because back then, that was before I started taking an interest in, psychology and how people function. I was just like, yeah, let's just create a character who has cool clothes. And then, like, they're usually connected to some historical event and there's like a revolution happening.
That's true. I mean, well, I mean, I think everyone's gone through that period, though, haven't they?
Just cool clothes, and like the aesthetic. And then, like, oh my God, like this cool historical thing is happening, this kind of thing.
I think everyone has gone through that. I mean, I know that's why a lot of people got into historical stuff. It was just for the aesthetic, as they say, the aesthetic, darling.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
now, ironically, as I moved away from the aesthetic, I actually wanted to write and draw more because I found it more rewarding to work with characters who weren't just, like, just a paper doll to dress up or, just, oh yeah, they represent this historical era and all the stuff that happened. I mean, yes, they have some historical connections. Sam is a historical character, but at the same time, he's much more relatable than most that I wrote about before because he's not just a 2D paper doll to dress up. He's more three-dimensional. He has a mind of his own. And his story is about him growing up, not just about the era he's in. Yes, his experiences reflect the era that he's in, but it's not just like, oh, he's this minor character who's just thrown in, but we see him all the time, but we don't really know how he works. We just see him wear the clothes. And then this event happens because he's in this historical era, and then we're just told about him rather than actually understanding the things that happened to him.
Exactly. I think maybe that's why sometimes historical fiction can be a little bit unsatisfactory, because then you're just getting, if you will, very bland actors in costumes.
In a way, yeah, it is. And it always feels a little bit less like relatable in a sense than modern stuff, as we talked about with Helleborn, for various reasons. But we can't forget that people in the past were just as complex as the people today. I think a lot of people just reduced them to paper dolls, like I said.
I think they do. And that's not only a problem with, history, that's also pretty much a problem with fantasy. Like, everyone gets lost in the world, and, oh, this cool costume or this cool magic, and like, oh, forget the character. Oh, okay, yeah, they died. Oh yeah, they lost their grandparents. Blah, sauce. That's sad.
Yeah, but we don't like it's like they mostly have tropes. Like the personalities are like, oh yeah, the sassy girl, the hot-headed guy like Naruto.
Yeah. Oh no.
Like the mage who's evil and doesn't believe in good or something.
Yeah, Voldemort.
Yeah. Or like the wise old man, like Gandalf and Dumbledore.
Dumbledore. Yeah,
Dumbledore.
I mean, you know what? If somebody asked me, I'm going to send you on a desert island. Who do you want? Who would you rather have? I would rather have um Gandalf because he is not such a self-righteous bore like Dumbledore.
I didn't even think Dumbledore really had a personality. Like the only thing we really know about him is, at the end of every Harry Potter novel, he just starts lecturing Harry and then Harry starts screaming at him. That's all I remember.
Yeah, and like he's just like he just came off as very self-righteous and like it's such an arbiter. Like, did we need that? You know?
I thought he was okay. He's just not particularly interesting. I
Can we
guess
get
he was
past
trying to be like a wise mentor to Harry, but like he wasn't that appealing of a character. And then Harry just came off as really emo. He was always screaming at Dumbledore. I don't know why. I can't remember. I guess he was traumatized by certain events. And he's like, "You don't understand." And it's all in caps. That's all I remember.
that was a very that you could get away with that in the 90s.
In the 2000s, because I mostly read them in the 2000s. Like, I mean, the first book came out in the 1997, I think, but I didn't really read it that much because I was so young. So I just browsed through it. But starting from book number 5 in 2006, I read it more. And that was when I started remembering more things about Harry Potter, not just stuff I remembered from the movies.
Right, right. But yeah, I mean, that's how did we get onto this? Oh yeah, because of characters, dress up dolls and things like that. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for good design. I mean, I live for a lot of aesthetics in fantasy, but for me, I think the characters need to mold the aesthetics. So it's like they look this way because they are like this way. Like for example, when I designed Kai, his job and personality dictate the way he looks. And, that can get misinterpreted a lot of ways. I know when people were first guessing who he was, everyone thought he was an evil sorcerer, like an ice sorcerer or
Mm-hmm.
something. And he looks like that, but he's not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now,
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this amazing podcast episode. And next time, we're going to be talking about another one of my short stories, I believe, right?
yes, yes, I believe that we are going to do, let's see, I think it's, do I announce it?
Yes.
Joel's Guide to Verbal Jousting.
Yes, and it's very different from Ode to Odessa in many ways.
It certainly is, especially since we are dealing with a particular character, that the titular character of Joel.
He's very different from Sam in many ways, and his voice is very different too, as we will see.
Yes, yes, it is. Despite their similarities in upbringing and experiences, he is very different from Sam. So I can't wait to explore that when we do our next podcast.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much again.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on again. It was a delight and an honor. So thank you.
All right, see you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.